Hello, this is another G.I. Joe product review. I am David Allen, and I have a special guest with me today, the research specialist on G.I. Joe Saturday Morning Adventures, the IDW comics miniseries based on, I guess, animated Sunbow cartoons. Hello, Diana. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, all things considered. Thank you for joining me. Um, how is it that you got involved in this type of a project as a research consultant?
Um, in terms of the Saturday morning adventures, that came because I'm research specialist on G.I. Joe, a real American hero, and I've been doing that for a few years. And that came about because I got an email from Tom Waltz, whom I had met at a few conventions and also chatted with online happily. And he said, we just want to bring someone on to check over things and make sure everything's good. And I can throw things your way, or an artist or someone can ask things, or if Larry needs to go back and look up back issues, it's easier for us to have someone do it as opposed to him taking time away from writing to do it. And I asked Larry if he knew anyone, and he recommended you, which is incredibly amazing. And I didn't quite believe at the time, but I've asked Larry. He's like, yeah, it helps that when you're in a fandom and you go to conventions, you get to meet the people who actually do it and have conversations and talk with them and do whatever. And that comes back to you sometimes. It was just a really great, nice surprise. So when they said they were going to do the book, I actually sort of said, well, I love the cartoon. Do you need help with that? And they said, sure, we just figured out that you would be doing it. So it was a really great thing that kind of happily fell into my lap just as a benefit of going out and meeting people at conventions and at the old G.I. Joe convention as well.
Well, you're in California. You must be going to the SoCal Joe show, which I've always wanted to go to, and I've met the guys from that show a lot. They come out here to Toylanta, Joe Fest, and Kentuckiana, and a couple of the other shows. And I've always wanted to go out to their show. It's a little bit difficult now with everything that's been going on the last few years to get out to California, though. But I'm right there with you at shows. I go to a lot of shows, probably thousands of shows I've been to in my lifetime, and I've gotten the opportunity to meet a lot of these creators, Larry Hama a lot, Chuck Dixon, Robert Atkins, the Devil Deuce guys back in the early 90s or 2000s, I should say. So that's awesome that you are able to capitalize on something like that, your fandom, your love of something. And you don't really see a lot of female G.I. Joe fans. I've been to these shows. You don't. Obviously, you've been to a lot of shows. What do you feel about that? Why is it, as a female, that you love G.I. Joe?
I've loved G.I. Joe since it first came out back in the 80s, especially. I mean, it was a little easier for fans to get on board because there were so many, there's toys, comics, cartoons, hordes of licensed products all over the place. In the 80s, it was difficult to go anywhere and not see a G.I. Joe anything. And the animation was something that was on in almost every house all over. I mean, at one time, the comic book was the #1 selling comic book. There are a lot of women fans of G.I. Joe. There were a lot of women fans of G.I. Joe, and there probably will have been some fans that you will never hear from even back in the 80s, because it was a great animated show, it was a great comic, and it was a great toy. And you got to remember that in reality, in my mind, there's not like girl comics and boy comics, although there's comics that are more like romantic or cute or adorable or about maybe less aggressive things. And there are comics that are about adventure or battles or adversity, but that's not specifically gendered. There's just good comics. And so back then I read good comics and I liked animation, but I liked good animation. And some of the shows that were aimed at girls back then were not. I mean, there were a couple of stands out. Gem back then was really amazing. That's why it's got a huge male audience from back then as well. But it was a great, well-written cartoon, as was the comic. So I just was naturally drawn to it. I think a lot of women were. And the same thing Larry says, women weren't there with their hands like permanently stapled to their foreheads, fainting and being rescued. They were just out there doing stuff, right? So
Yep.
it was a great thing for a girl to be attracted to. And I know a good collection of great female Joe fans, cosplayers, fan fiction writers, comic book people, artists. I mean, one of the main things I do is collect sketches, and going around and collecting sketches. I pick name artists sometimes, but I also just pick an artist because I like their style. And I've happened across so many female artists who were around my age or a little younger who they adore GI Joe. They just adore it and they love drawing it. You just have to look out for it more.
Well, I find it interesting because the comic itself, the Saturday Morning Adventures, dubs you as the research specialist. So you've kind of got your own code name now, like a GI Joe code name, the specialist.
Yeah.
And
I started out as an assistant and I got promoted, and they told me right before the issue where the change happened. And that was kind of nice. I like that.
I do too. I think it's really cool. So I want to talk a little bit about this comic. I think that's why we're both here. This comic is actually a fantastic comic in its own right. The art and the writing, it feels like I'm literally reading or watching a animated Sunbow cartoon on paper. Even though I know animation is created on paper, it's done in 2D form, but it's very nostalgic. It's very like, it harkens back to the original animated Sunbow series. Can you speak a little bit about that process and the work that Eric and Dan have been doing on the series since you're kind of involved?
Right. And watching them work has been fantastic. You got to remember, I am actually the lowest rung on any ladder to do with either comic. I just help out and I do the best I can. The guys behind the creation of both A Real American Hero and Saturday Morning Adventures are fantastic. Of course, we've got Larry, and we've got the many amazing artists that have worked with him. We've got his colorist, Jay Brown. We've often got Neil Uyetake on like lettering. For Saturday Morning Adventures, you've got Eric Burnham, Dan Shaning, and Luis Antonio Delgado. And that team clicks. That team working together. So when Eric writes, he writes, it's like reading a script. I mean, I've read, you can purchase, like say Christy Marks is still selling her G.I. Joe scripts, copies that she'll print off and you can have your own copy and she'll sign it. And so when you read Eric's scripts, they're like reading an old script that you've got before. He's dialed in the cartoon. He's got the overall feeling, it is a little crazy. Weird things do happen, but there's also like some really solid little bits in there. And also the characters act like people. You'll see a little line or a joke. Like I think in the recent issue, Flint says to Wild Bill, it's not a competition, Bill. And Bill's like, the heck it ain't, Flint. And that doesn't have to be in the comic, but putting little bits like that in, those were the bits that were in the animated show that everyone loved, that made it so good. It doesn't need to be there. It's not part of the progression of the story. It makes them relatable human beings. And so Eric has completely got that feeling. Dan can draw exactly like Sunbow. You just can copy it. He did an issue of A Real American Hero. I forget the number off the top of my head. It was a winter battle. And when it came out, everyone went, "Oh my God, it looks just like the cartoon." He has done, like they've got their Ghostbusters comics. They've been doing another thing. They can get that. So it's not copying. It's not ripping off. It's just to style. It's on model is what an animator would say. And that's part of what I do is if something slips a little bit off of the old models, I can, when I see the line art or the colors, I can sort of mention it. But on top of that, and someone who doesn't get mentioned a lot is Luis Antonio Delgado, because you have to understand when you color a comic, there's several different styles of coloring. And what he's doing is an animation cell shading coloring style, where it's maybe a little more colorful and flat. And it's also the animation style from the 80s, which is why the comic looks so perfectly like you're watching the cartoon. A lot of people have said they can hear the voice actors' voices when they're reading it. That's really good. I mean, that just shows you how good it is. Those guys are amazing. They've got it.
You're 100% correct, because back in the 90s, they had the Batman the animated series, and they did the comic book. And obviously the comic artists were working on the animated series, but they looked identical to each other. So it's on model, like you said. So but it's really an interesting thing, this series. I'm curious why it took IDW so long to do something like this. The fans have been crying for something like this for decades.
Oh, we wanted it forever. Sunbow season 3, the season we were denied because the series went to DIC, or DIC as some people say. And it sort of did. It was never the same. It was too dumbed down, basically. It was too dumbed down. It was too cheap. The fact that it was done for less money, which the reasoning behind it, I don't know, because I wasn't in that boardroom. So maybe there was a really big reason, but you could tell. Yeah, we've been asking for it. They tried. There was another attempt a few years ago in a G.I. Joe yearbook that had Dawn on the cover. It was called Infinite Cobra. And it was fantastic. And darn it, I need to look up the name of the author and the artist for that one, because it looked like it was continuing exactly from the movie. And that got a lot of us excited. I was excited. I was incredibly excited. In fact, that was one of the things that when I went down to SDCC before I was even on the book, I found Tom and I grabbed him and I'm like, no, we need Infinite Cobra and we need it now. We need the cartoon. I don't know why it took so long. It's not going to be just one company. It's not going to be just IDW, because whenever IDW does anything to do with Joe or Transformers, it has to be okayed all the way up the ladder in Hasbro as well. And it may be that, they just didn't necessarily see how many people actually wanted it. And it's hard in a fandom of any sort. The Joe fandom sort of shrunk and expanded and shrunk and expanded. It's hard sometimes when you have a diverse fandom, as G.I. Joe is, where you have different people saying, we want different things. And, there's been some people who didn't like the cartoon. There's been some people who like the cartoon better than the comic. Then there's those of us who love everything and all about it, and let's do it. I think it may have helped that when Dan Channing's issue that he did for ARAH, that Winter Battle, which was a fantastic issue, remember the number, I'll ask you to go back and read it. That came out and there was a bit of a reaction to it. There really was. But I think it had probably been pitched a few times before someone finally said, well, let's try it. And I think it may have helped that worked well, that a few years before there was an attempt that didn't finish, but it had gotten a little bit of interest. And in general, for this, it's 4 issues, which makes me kind of sad because I want it to continue. But I'm not sure it has to stay 4 issues. I think a lot of the time, if something is successful and fans write in and say they want it, maybe an ear will listen and maybe it will continue on beyond 4 issues. It also depends upon whether Dan, Eric, and Luis want to continue it beyond 4 issues. I think they do. They seem to be enjoying the heck out of it, but that's got to factor in as well. So we'll see. I just think it had to have all the little pieces had to be in the right place for this to go through. And they finally were, and it's worked fantastically. It's amazing. I mean, you go and you try and find issues and they're gone.
You're right. And there's a lot of variants too. Now the variants are hard to get as well. I fortunately was able to get one of the variants on issue 2. But you're correct. I think you're right on point with that, because I believe the original animated miniseries in 1983 that was done through Nickelodeon, that was the only animation planned. There was nothing else planned. I believe I've heard Kurt Busigian comment on this. It was because the fan reaction to that they did another miniseries, and then the fan reaction, and then it continued on from there, and then they were able to do the regular series. So these things, as much as you hate to say it, the vocal minority sometimes is a positive in certain things like this, but the silent majority in something like this would hurt a property. You need to kind of get out there. You need to put up a sign and say, I love G.I. Joe, please give me something, and we've had lulls, and we've had dead time and stuff like that. And it's come back. It's always come back stronger every time. Right now, we're really in a zenith. I haven't seen it like this since maybe the mid 2000s, 2007, 2008. There's so much stuff at that point. And now
Oh,
there's like tons.
it's amazing. It's not exactly like the 80s where you could go to a Toys R Us and there'd be
Yes.
two sides of the or one side of the GI Joe aisle stretching as far as my little eyes could see. But there is a lot out there. There's figures, there's skateboards, there's figures of different sizes. I can now have my favorite Joe in almost every single scale I want. I haven't done it yet, but I'm getting them there. There's a lot out there. And the thing with fandoms and vocal minorities and silent majorities and people wanting different things is, honestly, in the beginning, all three parts of G.I. Joe were different. And if you ask Kirk Bazzigan about this, because he's told me, there's the comic continuity with Larry, there was the cartoon continuity with Sunbow, and then actually the toys were a slightly different continuity than that. And in that way, everyone could do it. And of course, kids with toys can play out whatever they want. They can do the cartoon, they could do the comic, they could combine the two, they could create their own. And I'm completely behind people doing that, as long as they're having a fun time. What I don't really support is anyone who's like, that is wrong, that is not real. Like if I hear someone say, that's not the real G.I. Joe, what is? There have been so many versions of it going all the way back to the 60s. As long as it's not like a horrific, like oppressing human beings thing or doing illegal things to people, you're not hurting someone. Let people enjoy things. I don't mind if someone doesn't like what I like. I just mind when they tell me that I'm wrong for liking it.
Yep, you're 100% correct in that. I agree with you 100% on that. We all have our own play patterns, and no one should be stifling any of us in any way unless we're hurting somebody else in the process. And then, okay, but you're 100% correct in that. And there are different things. And I know IDW has done a lot of different stuff. They've done the Sigma 6 cartoon comic. They've done serious, like adult comics with the Chuckles and Cobra comics.
And remember Hearts and Minds from Max Brooks?
Yeah.
That was pretty impressive too. Yeah.
They've tried a lot of different things, and it's still astonishing that it took them this long to get to this. And I've enjoyed the story. It seems like a no-brainer of a story. It seems just like what Cobra Commander would have done in the cartoon. Yeah, you know, I found a ancient relic, and I don't want to spoil it for the folks that haven't read it, but go out and read it. But you know, Cobra Commander goes on a tirade and starts heck with G.I. Joe, and they have to stop him. So that's as far as
all over the world, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So so that's an interesting thing that you are a research specialist, because people have given Larry Hama a hard time over the years because he's brought characters that he's killed off back to life, like Sneak Peek and stuff like that. So I wonder if that had something to do with them trying to get a consultant to stop issues like that. Have you run across anything that crazy yet?
There are sometimes things where, you know, you got to remember it's been 40 years. You're writing for hundreds of characters for 40 years with a few breaks in the middle. And you have other stuff that you do as well. Like you have other things you're doing. As fans, we focus on our fandoms, but people who are writing comics or engaging in a whole bunch of other jobs on the side, or just doing spreading their abilities over a wide career of different things, you're not necessarily going to remember every detail. Things like that happen in comics all the time. Some characters, some comics writers have created characters that just have healing powers. That way they don't have to worry who's dead. Well, didn't you kill him? Well, yeah, he's got healing powers. He came back. You can't necessarily do that in a comic about soldiers because no one actually has healing powers. So now and again, in amazingly any work, that will slip through. You read Lord of the Rings, there's continuity things. You read anything, there's continuity problems. And most of the time, like my band conductor in junior high school said, if you play a wrong note, don't stop. If you play a wrong note, just keep going. No one's going to notice. If you stop, then they notice. But it can help sometimes to have as many sets of eyes on things. You know that if you've written a story or you're putting together a report, you need to stop and look away and have somebody who hasn't seen it for the last 5, 6, 7 weeks, days, whatever, take a look to see what you've missed that you might have caught, but it's kind of hard when you've been doing that same thing forever. That's possibly it. And sometimes there are things that happen when they send me something that isn't part of my overall job description or my role that I might catch. And that happens through the whole team. If someone catches something or has an idea, it's no problem for them to email someone and say, hey, boom. And then it gets, and sometimes things aren't caught until the trades. And sometimes we all miss something. And in the end, it's not really that big of a deal. There'll be things like Red October. Why are they back? Well, you have now an issue. That's what happened. That's how they're back. And it kind of fits into the story. But I suppose so. It's not an issue for Saturday Morning Adventures. That's more in terms of just being able to have someone who hyper focused on the cartoon for so long, able to know exactly where to look things up. I was looking up wristwatch communicators just yesterday, just to see, is that a thing? Yes, that was a thing. They had that. Well, did they use walkie-talkies? They used both. It's a cartoon. Sometimes they had headset. These kinds of things fall in. But yeah, in terms of any comic book writer and continuity errors, I don't think that we should overlook the fact that Larry's been this almost exclusively, with a few exceptions, the one writer on that comic since it started. And there aren't many people who can match that, honestly, unless, yeah, there aren't many people who can match that. So to have expectations that he's going to be perfect all the time, it's kind of a little much for me.
Well, there's only 2 people that I'm aware of that has reached 300 or more consecutive issues of a comic book as the writer. Jeff Smith on Bone, and I believe Todd McFarlane on Spawn, with the exception of maybe Brian Bendis, who did do a really long run of Ultimate Spider-Man, and Stan Lee, who did several really long runs on Spider-Man. I believe they have the record. So Larry Hama is almost up to 300 issues now, and he did the first 155 issues with the exception of 2. So he would only have to go up to 302, and he would match the other 2 record holders.
Right. And, you know, he's what you mentioned, 5 other names. That's amazing considering how many comic books are out there.
Yeah, there's lots. You're correct on that. So I'm curious about about your job duties and what specifically your job duties are and how you go about that, because I've never heard of a G.I. Joe specialist or consultant or researcher before this.
Neither have I. It's something I'd never heard of. Most of the time, I get sent or linked in to everything from scripts on. Okay, and actually sometimes I get treatments. Now Larry writes the old Marvel methods, so he's going to lay out actually the panels in a description of what's going on in quite pretty much page by page, panel by panel. He does that first before he scripts. So I get that, and I look over the characters that he's brought on and what's going on. And if I see anything, if anything sticks out, then I mention it then. And so then he'll fix it. Then I will get from the artists things like sometimes I'll get the thumbnails if they do thumbnails. And then I'll get this pencils, and then it'll move on from there. So every step of the way, they send it my way just in case something's off that I can catch. And I'm sure I'm one of a couple of people checking. If I catch something and I mention it right away, it can get addressed right up until right before it goes to print, if it's minor enough. If it's like something that's going to be very hard to fix and it's right before print, that's going to be something that's going to be fixed in the trades once it goes out there. But usually, and I'm not perfect either, usually somebody will catch it before. Now, I was first brought on to make sure, remember when they did a Snake Hunt and they had every Joe. We had to make sure we had every Joe, but you know, a couple of dead people didn't walk through in the background. This even happened in G.I. Joe the movie, right? You'll see in the background a couple of Joes who are supposed to be in an alternate universe. They're not there anymore. They came back. It's okay. We've got a couple who are in 2 places at once. That happens when you have to draw as many GI Joes as you can cram on the page, and you just want to have them walking in the background. Or that guy's dead. Let's make him someone else. So that was pretty much it for that one. And now also, artists who need reference from past comics, or if Larry needs reference from past comics, or which issue did I do this in, that also is my job to go back over issues and find them either the reference they need or an idea that they need. Sometimes they just need it for the toy and they don't have time to get it themselves because they've got to get this in under deadline. So it helps to have somebody else with a free hour or 2 or 10 or however long it takes me to look up some things. Usually it's not hard. Sometimes it's specific. And that's what I would do with ARAH. In terms of Saturday morning, it's not so much dead people because it didn't happen. And you have to see, you've seen from it with issue 1, is it sort of like somewhere between season 1 and before Serpentor gets created. So you've got a few season 2 people and you've got season 1 people. So they're not really worried about sticking it into any continuity, but they do want to make sure people are on model. Sometimes the colorist was not as a major a fan as some people are, so he may not remember the color of a jet or the details or the decals. And also to make sure that when they used a reference, they might have used a toy, but sometimes there's a little slight difference. Okay, and that's generally what they do. Sometimes they'll ask me, the artist, sometimes Dan will send me a request. I need as many different facial expressions for Polly as you can find me. Find me as many Polly facial expressions as you can. Okay, I can do that. I can go up to a bunch of them and find them. Or, what's that thing on Doc's arm? Does he wear it all the time? That would generally be it. And then at the end of that one, I get the colors just to make sure that the colors match up and everything's basically on model. Some things have slipped through, but they're tiny and they're not worth going back and fixing when there's a deadline to meet. So again, they'll be fixed in the trades, but most people will not notice them.
There's actually things, I'm sure this wouldn't surprise you, things that were in the original comics from the 80s that nobody caught, and they put them out on trade paperback in the 2000s through Devil's Due and then IDW, and nobody noticed it until they did those trade paperbacks in the 2000s. And that was nearly 25 years. Nobody caught the certain errors and gaps and stuff like that. Yeah. And I've talked to Larry about that, and he says, yeah, because the machine was going. It was difficult to stop the machine, and now they've inserted you in the machine, so you're the cog now of the machine to hopefully not let the machine down. But I find that interesting. I like how the sauce is made. That intrigues me, and I've talked to Larry a lot of times about this sort of stuff at conventions. And he and I talked about Cesspool at a convention. I think it was Pensacon. And I said, I really love Cesspool. I think he's an awesome character, and you've yet to use him in your new IDW series, and you got this series where you're gonna have every GI Joe. You think you can squeeze in Cesspool? Says, I never thought about it, but you never know. And then the comic came out like 6 months later or whatever, and Cesspool was in there. And so I go up to Larry a year later at a show. I said, Larry, is it because of our conversation that you stuck Cesspool in that storyline? He says, probably.
Yeah. Yeah, it's possible. I mean, he reacted to a bunch of fans in the Philippines who said, Philippine people have been going over to America and being in the Air Force and the military, and we love it. We love G.I. Joe. And, someone just mentioned it. We'd like to see a Filipino Joe. Now we have Molto and we have some others. And it's not just that, but he's aware that people have their favorite character. And sometimes they're big, famous characters that are going to be in the books anyways. Right. And sometimes they're not. And I know that he goes through his own reference and his own resources, which are like people's collector's guides, posters of, like the 3D Joe's posters. He has those there. And when he needs a character, sometimes he's just going to thumb through and say, well, who haven't I used? That person's going to have a fan. So there's going to be somebody who's going to be exceedingly happy if I put this in. Even an aside, there's a fan who just likes the idea of Xandar and Serena being twins. This person's amazing because that's their thing, and I love it. They love that, and I like fans having their thing that makes them happy. And that was like, I think they should be. It makes sense. And it got back to him. He sees these things. He knows these people. He reads the letters. And so he put it into a book. He had somebody call them the twins. It's that kind of thing. And that's great when the fandom gets to a point that you can communicate with the creator. And he is listening. He can't do everything everybody wants. And he's not going to do something that goes against who he is either. But there's that out there, that it goes both ways. He likes people who are enjoying his comic, and he wants people to enjoy it, of course. Let him know. I would love to have more letters go into the comic to Larry. And Saturday morning, afternoon, I don't even know if they have a letters page planned. I hope so, because I think people should be writing letters in about that one. That's the one thing that, even though it's old-fashioned and everyone communicates online and in groups anyways, letters to comics are still kind of important to a lot of the people making them.
It's true. I agree with you. I've been fortunate to have 2 letters put into, well, I shouldn't say put into comics, but one of them was put into a comic. One of them was responded to as a child when I was young, reading the original comic by Larry himself. I've been trying to dig my letter out because every time I mention it to him at a convention, he's like, send me a picture of it. I want to see the letter and stuff. And I know where it is. It's just a matter of getting to it. When you have so much stuff as an adult, it's difficult to dig stuff out, but I plan on it. It's one of those treasures of mine that he actually responded to me in a letter. And I think I got a letter in one of the IDW comics. Oh God, I can't remember what it was, but it was something that they were doing. And I was like, why are you doing this? It goes against G.I. Joe or whatever. And they were like, well, no, it goes against G.I. Joe until G.I. Joe resolves it or something like that. So they came up with a psychological response to my thing. Like, I'm supposed to see the future of when they're going to solve the problem, or whatever. And so they sent that in my letter. And I thought, oh, okay, thanks. Makes me look stupid, but that's all right.
Oh. I think hopefully they just meant, wait, it's going to be addressed. Hang on.
Maybe.
It's hard. Yeah.
But you're right.
Sometimes that hurts. Yeah.
Yeah, but you're right. I think they should definitely do a letters page. And a lot of the comic companies do letters pages still, but you have to put it okay to print at the bottom of it, because there's, I don't know, licensing or copyright infringement. I don't know what it all is, but
yeah, it's important. I think a lot of people write comic book companies now because they want to either register a complaint or make a comment on something, and they don't want it printed. They just want people to know. And if those were printed, then those individuals might get angry, and legal things might happen. So in our new internet day and age, it's important that we all remember to. And I think a lot of comic letters now, people forget. You need to really put that in. Okay to print. Frankly, if I were doing it, put it in the subject column as well. Put it right there in the subject. Letter about. Say letter about whatever comic you're writing about, and then put okay to print. And put okay to print in the body of the letter. Freaking, if you want to put it in your signature as well, put okay to print in your signature as well. If you really want your comic letter printed in the comic itself.
And Larry does answer every one of those letters. He says in the ARAH series that I read every letter. I don't obviously have space in the comic to put every letter in there. It's in the editorial thing, but he reads every letter. He's been reading every letter for 40 years. As far as I know, I've seen him do interviews, and he has mentioned this numerous times as well to fans that they felt that their letter wasn't answered. He says, look, if your letter doesn't appear in the comic, that doesn't mean it didn't get read. I read. He was the editor for, I believe, ROM. So he reads all this stuff. And I think he has a level, Larry Hama is on a level of fandom that no other creator, and I think in the world of anything, actors, animated voice actors, other writers, authors, no one else. He knows this fan base and he's involved in this fan base and he's contributed to the fan base in numerous ways. And people, I don't think people really give him the credit that he's due. They give him the credit. Yeah, he's the author of G.I. Joe for nearly 300 issues and stuff like that. And he's in the community. But I think people still ruffle his feathers, especially in his Facebook page. I see people saying things. I'm like, you just don't know what you're talking about, people. If you knew the things that I know about Larry and the interactions I've had with Larry, and I know other fans have had the same, like myself and probably you as well, that they wouldn't be doing that. And people are so quick to make a comment online where they can't be face to face with the individual. Even though you and I are face to face, I could type in some comment or whatever and belittle a person's work or smudge someone's character. And that, I think that's just terrible. I don't think people should do those things. And Larry doesn't deserve stuff like that. I really hold him in a high regard.
Yeah. Kindness, I think the first thing to remember is kindness is free. And sometimes when you're angry, it's very hard to be kind. And it's being behind a screen or in front of a screen makes you feel removed from the situation. And we have to remember that people get angry quickest when they feel hurt or pushed aside. And no one should feel hurt and pushed aside. But then the difference is, can I stop and think about this and let it go and leave it and then go back to it and address it in my head later? Or am I going to react just like that and type exactly what I feel this second without waiting to frame it in a better, different context? On the top of that, for a lot of people who don't always get to conventions or see things, it's hard to remember that in the 80s, you felt he was a hero. It's amazing that we get to meet someone like any of the comic creators out there, any of them, but especially the one that writes the thing you love. In the 80s, that was not possible for most kids. Even at conventions, it was not possible to meet him. And that has created sort of a subconscious feeling that you may not even know that, remember guys, Larry Hama is a human being. He's a guy. He's a person with feelings and emotions, and he gets grumpy and he gets tired and he's happy and he likes things and he gets disappointed and sad. He feels he's a human being, and he's not going to be perfect at all times either. But he loves to hear from people who enjoy what he does.
That's it.
So remember that if something happens that you don't like or isn't your particular ideology or way of seeing the world, hold off on that. Hold off on that. The Saturday Morning Adventures did that PSA after #1 where the kid's like, I'm going to tell everyone. No, stop. Think about that. You may feel that way. Your feelings may be valid. You feel that way. So I can't say that you don't feel that way. Something made you feel that way. You can tell me, if you can not be insulting, what made you feel that way, and I'll think about it. But we've got that screen, and it's not a force field, but people, because we have a keyboard and a screen and social media, it gets really complex when you go into the social media echo chambers that people are getting back what they put out. So the more you put out that kind of thing, that's all you're going to see on your feed. And then you get the kind of idea that everyone agrees and that's the right thing. And that's for everyone. That's for me. That's for you. That's for everyone in the country. If you're on social media and you don't take some pretty drastic steps that are continuous to make sure your feed isn't narrowed, that's going to exacerbate the problem of people feeling that, A, he's not human, because I never met him, so I don't think of him as a person the same way a person in the room or a person who doesn't write my favorite comic. Let's not say they hate him. It's like, people who abuse customer service people. They wouldn't treat someone they know like that.
Yeah.
But you've sort of got this idea that they're not entirely different than the photocopier over there. It's not an uncommon thing. So, I don't want people who don't like what's going on to feel like they're being attacked, because it's okay to not like something. It's perfectly fine. There's lots of things I don't like. Brussels sprouts, actually I like Brussels sprouts, but like eucalyptus trees, peacocks. I'm not wild about DIC animation, but some people are. I don't like a lot of things. But I have had issues in the past, and I've had to try and slow myself down and open up my social media feeds by I like hit the X on hide ad on every single ad, even if it's an ad I agree with. Okay. And I do that. It takes me forever, but I hide all the ads, not just because I don't want to see them, but because I'm going to see more anyways. But because that way, if I hide all the ads, the algorithm is having a problem getting a hold of what I'm like. And it's funny because that's a lot different than share. You think it'd be stuff you share on your feed, right? It's not. It seems to be all the ads. So if I hide all the ads and don't react to ads and do all that, even if they're political ads, if they're ads for a yogurt, I don't care. And that has kept my feed a little more open. Also, find friends in the fandom that may not agree with everything you like. As long as you guys can talk about what you like and why you like it in a respectful, fun way and enjoy that, it's kind of a good idea to get disparate opinions in the fan. That's what keeps things interesting.
I 100% agree with you, because if you get people who are identical carbon copies of you, that's kind of boring, and you're going to have a very dull life. If you get people that have not 100% agree, maybe they have slight things that they like that's the same, or slight things they don't like on certain things you like, stuff like that, like the DiC cartoon you've mentioned a few times. I personally don't care for it that much, other than the fact that one of my all-time favorite characters, Cesspool, is in it. But it obviously wasn't quality. And Kurt Busiek has said this in numerous panel discussions that I've attended, where he says, yeah, they went cheap with it, and that was a problem, and it didn't help the line. They needed to stick with what was tried and true, and what could have kept the line strong. And the years that they didn't have animation, the line was weak, and the years they did have animation, it was strong. But obviously the animation they had in the 90s, it didn't help because it got canceled anyway.
Yeah. And it's hard now to dial in animation that works. I mean, people would love Sunbow to come back, but remember back then, that stood out. A lot of animation was really pretty bad back then. So something that took that much effort, and they plugged money into it. They had great writers, they had great actors, they had a great voiceover director in Wally Burr. They had people who had been working in comics for years, who had come over to do animation. Animation took off there. Now, although animation, actually, you've got some fantastic animation out there, it's hard to get the right tone, the right style, the right distributor, the right actors. It's very impossible to get everyone's expectations met. And again, in a fandom this diverse, it might be.
Look at Masters of the Universe. Boy, I never expected that backlash on that. But yeah, if you're a Motu fan or notice any of that, God, that was terrible.
Well, yeah, because these are companies, and this is where the companies want to make money and get a new audience. So they have to balance all of the past and all the fans with all our different ideas and what we want and what we love and what we hate, with the fact that they want more people to watch it. And for G.I. Joe, they would like a pretty wide audience, anything from, kids all the way up to adults to enjoy it. You can't get one cartoon that's going to be able to do that. Right. I had a blast at that movie. I really did.
I did too.
I wish the fight scenes had been filmed by an Eastern fight cinematographer. I felt that was more of a Sunbow episode, because that makes sense with giant snakes and crystals, and no one ever saw Snake Eyes' face there. But I guess it's because I went into it without having to have an expectation that it'd be perfection. Yeah. And I didn't expect it to be like, All's Quiet on the Western Front or Unforgiven or anything like that. Yeah. I just wanted a fun movie. Frankly, I hadn't been to the theater in forever. So it was just nice to get out into a theater where we were all with a bunch of people having a reasonable, the audience who was there when I was there pretty much seemed to enjoy it. And that's because, you're out watching a movie. It's fun.
Well, Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Continue.
But I do see why people who had been hoping for the comic Snake Eyes story, I can see how they felt that didn't meet up to that expectation. I didn't have it. But again, you got to appeal to new people.
And that's the thing with this type of thing, as a comic fan, in my other life and a GI Joe collector my entire life, I look at these type of films and this type of material in two different ways. I look at it as a fan. I'm just going to go in, have a wonderful time, relax, enjoy myself. I'm at a movie, get some popcorn, whatever. And then I look at it in a critical review after the fact, because I've already watched it, enjoyed it, had a good time. Now I can say, well, could they have improved this? Could they have improved that? Yeah, they probably could have. But I can see through the logic of it how they went, the progression of certain things, where that came with this story. And there's a lot of movies where you can see how they came to certain decisions, and there's a lot of people in these decisions and a lot of committees involved in this stuff. And so, when they blame like Henry Cavill, it's not Henry Cavill that's making these decisions.
Right.
And it's not right. But I don't want to get off on a tangent. I just happen to have that in my background.
I did feel pretty bad that Henry Golding, who put a lot of work into that.
Why did I say Cavill? I don't know what the hell.
Well, no, don't worry about it, because people have been nasty to him too. But I don't like the some of the stuff that was spewed online. A lot of the nasty, he saw that, and I've heard reports and I've read our interviews that it really hurt. It really hurt, and everyone's like, "Oh, poor baby." He also is a human being.
Yeah.
He put a shit ton of work into that role.
Oh, yeah.
Excuse me swearing. But he did. And there have been actors who don't. They get a role and they just put in sort of work, and they just kind of half-ass do it, but it's a good property and it takes off anyways. But then there's people who are like, no, I want to do this right, so I'm going to work out and eat right and get buff and then study martial arts so I'm really good on screen. And shoot, that was a lot of work to do that. Then go back and do reshoots. And if you don't like a movie, you don't like the movie. Don't go see the movie. You could even say, I did not like that movie. That's cool. You could even swear a little. I did not like that effing movie. Fine. You didn't like it. That's cool. That's valid. Yeah. I don't see why you have to make the person in it feel horrible for being in it.
Yeah. Because it was a job. He was doing his job, and he did his job well, in my opinion. And people don't give people credit for the sweat and tears and the labor that they put into this work. It has to do with comics, has to do with film, animation, toy manufacture, has to do with all this stuff. And if someone came to my job and criticized me for the work that I do, they better have a legitimate excuse, like I did something that made them upset. That's fine. But if you're just going to say that you're a terrible person because you work for such and such, or you're a terrible person because you do this or whatever, that's not cool. That's not logical. It's just not nice. And people, like you said earlier, it's free to be kind, and I think we need to be, as a society, look at ourselves in the mirror and stop doing the things
right.
that we're doing.
Yeah. You don't have to like even that he was cast or the role or how he acted. All of these are valid things to not like, because nothing's going to appeal to everyone.
Right.
It's abject cruelty because you kind of can't see that he's human. And that happens with people who are so good at what they do, they're internationally famous. Yeah. Or they get paid well. Actors get paid incredibly. It's like musicians. Famous musicians get paid incredibly well. It's hard to see all the work that goes into that. And a lot of times the feeling is they're rich and famous, so their life is easy. Their life is definitely easy in many ways. And they may not be the most perfect people in the world, but they work hard. They're human. And if you've ever been on a set or of a show or a movie, it's long. 14, 15, 20, 30. Well, there's laws about that. There's no such thing as 30 hours on set, but it's a long day. It's a hard day. It's a tiring day. And sometimes it's a boring day where you have to be there sitting until it's your time, but you can't leave, but they're sitting. It's not a job a lot of people could do. Otherwise more people would. Just like any job, like freaking people who are good at their job. I don't care what the job is. They're good at it. It's hardworking. This person who works hard as an actor is the same as a person who works hard doing landscaping, freaking mechanics. God love them. Their job has gotten constantly harder every year as cars progress. But you know, if you don't like a car, you don't find the guy who designed it at GM and then like send him tons of hate mail, then send the company he works for tons of hate mail with his name on it. Like, fire Fred. I hated the Pontiac. What was that horrible car Pontiac put out? The Aztec. I hated the Aztec. Who designed it? And John Smith. John Smith sucks. And then you write him at home, and then you go on John Smith's social media feed. We don't do that, but it's perfectly valid not liking it. But yeah, these are all negative things. And again, I'll say that the people who did that, remember that they're human beings too. And you see people at your worst, you got to remember that they also have their best. And a lot of people at their best that you don't see are also doing amazing things. So we have to remember that kindness is free, has to go sort of all around. And as long as someone's not necessarily physically hurting you. And again, I have slipped in this too. And I have to remind myself, no, you got to calm down and relax. You never know what someone's bringing to their table. All you see is a snapshot in their life. So we have to be good with that. And I appreciate that. And I'm trying to become a better human all through my life in that.
And I'm in the same struggle you are, because I can kind of remember myself as a younger person doing things, and I'm like, why did I do that? Why did I make that decision at that point in my life? I think it has to do with maturity, has to do with experience, and overall like community and things like that, that you get other people around you and you see how they act and you see how they respond, and then you're like, well, I need to be a little bit better myself, look at myself in the mirror, and I've done the exact same thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
I'm questioning my older decisions, and I'm like, I don't think I made the correct decision in that, and I question myself on it now, and I'm like, ooh, if I ever have an opportunity to rectify that, I think I'm going to find that individual and apologize to him. And I think that is growing. And I think a lot of people need to grow. And I think a lot of people need to do self evaluations nowadays. I thought with the last couple of years, maybe people would have, but I think it got them further down the rabbit hole. But, I
yeah. And again, I think that the echo chambers that are created by algorithms have done us a disservice, which is why, getting back to positive things, having something that you can all enjoy, like conventions are opening up, and comic books are opening up, and fandoms are opening up, and people are now meeting each other again. And there's going to be some people who feel like, oh man, it's been a tough couple of years. I'm getting out there. Oh no, I'm going to meet these people that I may have been arguing with. Go meet them, talk to them, try and be cool with them, be cool with people out there. If they're not verbally or physically assaulting you or cruel to you at the moment, just give them a chance. That's the only thing I can say. Just give people it. There are going to be people who will continue to double, triple, quadruple down on that. Again, you don't know what's gone in their life too. And the best thing to do with those people is to let them know very succinctly, yep, that's the limit. There you go. And if you need to throw it out there, like this person needs to stop, then back off, and like I've seen that happen. The person made a mistake. The person made a mistake with multiple people. The multiple people got together and said, this person's been a jerk. I need him to stop. Be careful. Fine. And then a whole bunch of people like threaten that person's child. Like, what the heck are you people doing? Stop it. But that's just these echo chambers creating ideas that ways of acting are bad. But I want to move off that. I mean, I think we should talk more about cool things that we like.
Well, let's talk about conventions. Are you planning to go to any this year that we can meet you and talk to you and find out more about this specialist research that you're doing?
I was going to WonderCon, but I didn't make it. I've left teaching a year or so ago, and I've started working at a local bonsai nursery, which is fun. And oddly, at the end of the day, at the end of the month, considering I don't have to pay for a lot of my own supplies, I'm making just about as much as I was teaching, if not a little more. So that works out. So I couldn't go because Saturday is a really big day in terms of selling bonsai and nurseries and things. And then Sunday, I was just exhausted and couldn't make it. I will be at, and this has nothing to do with G.I. Joe, I know I'm going to go at least one day to Celebration down in Anaheim, which is very Star Warsy, but I've never been to a Celebration before. And I'm really excited. I bought tickets a while back and it got postponed, and I decided I would hang on to my tickets anyways. There is the SoCal Joe show I try to make when I can. It's a bit of a drive south for me, but it's a great show. If you can get to that one, it's a nice show. It's got a whole lot of stuff. There is the Robo Toy Fest, but there's also a G.I. Joe Con put on by Scott Zillner as well in Pasadena coming up. I'll have to get you info on that. I don't go as appearances because I'm just the lowest rung on the ladder. I just go to geek out with everyone else. But if you find me, hi Paloma, if you find me, you know, I'd love to stop and geek out over comic books. I mean, my husband is generally in tow because he can help me carry things, but he has surprisingly, and this is not necessarily connected to me, but he has gotten work. He's colored a couple of issues, a couple of covers, not the whole issues, just the covers. So every so often they'll drop him a cover, and he has colored the recent issues he did, where he has done 3 of the variants for Saturday Morning Adventures.
Wow.
And we have some exciting variants coming up because I thought, well, this is going well and this is nostalgia. So we managed to reach out to 3 storyboard artists from the Sunbow days. And remember, the guys who were doing the storyboards back then, they're basically the directors. They don't tell the people, they don't tell the voice actors how to act because you can't see them. But they direct because they put everything into the scene. They take the script and they make it visual. So we have 3 variants. One's coming up. It is going to be the retail incentive. Every time they buy 10 of the other covers, they get one of these. That's by Will Muno. That's coming out for issue 3. So hopefully, make sure your comic book shop gets it, because the only way you're going to get it for like cover price is to ask for it. Oh, you got one there, right? You got a variant?
I got a variant, and it also has all the, I think, variants for next month in it. The next issue.
Is it issue 2? Does it show the Will Muno cover?
There's 2.
Well, that's for 2. That's the variant still for issue 2. So that's not, they're on my Facebook page if you want to find them.
Oh, okay. So the covers in the back of these are the variants for the issues that they are
Should
in.
be for that issue, I believe. What cover do you have?
That's the cover for issue 3, right?
3. Yeah, that's for issue 3. Okay, so yeah, the one for the Will Muno cover for issue 3 is on my Facebook page with the others. I don't have the trade dress, and with that cover, I'm not sure they're going to do a trade dress with the logo on top because there's so much detail in that one. We contacted Will. He's working actually on an exciting other project that I don't know the details of, but he'll be able to release soon. So then Tom Waltz said, well, he did a piece for you, right? Does he mind us using that? So somehow one of my collection nerdnesses pieces is going to end up being a cover, which is cool. So Cullen colored that. Then there are now, for issue 4, Larry Houston, who we all know did the most fantastic G.I. Joe the movie opener. Also the Pythona running down the hallway and killing all the, she didn't kill them, right? Nobody dies in the cartoon. And just sort of knocking aside the Crimson Guard guys, right? They're not dead. He is doing a variant cover. And then we have Rick Hoberg, who also is a storyboard artist, is doing another variant. And both of those are for issue 4. Wow. And I think that's, for the 40th anniversary, I think it's really exciting to get those guys and to have them back and have them have an actual G.I. Joe cover. Will has never, he's like, I'm so looking forward to seeing a comic cover with my name, my art, and then G.I. Joe on there. And so, yeah, anyone who wants to see them, you'll have to scroll down a lot of pictures of dogs and tortoises and trees and things. But they're on my page, and I can send you a link if you want to put those up later. They're pretty exciting. I'm excited. I'm totally geeking out over it that happened. It comes full circle.
I think because we're friends on Facebook, I think I've seen your postings when you've showed covers off. So I may have already seen those,
Mhm.
but I will endeavor to go back and look again, because you've really got me excited now on some of that. Because I remember you commenting about the gentleman that did the movie Beginning, doing a cover in one of your comments, if I recall that correctly or not.
Yeah.
Can't remember or not.
Well, I just
Um,
thank those men for having the time to do it in the interest of Will and Rick collaborated on an X-Men cover just recently because, of course, they're doing the X-Men comic calling back to the X-Men cartoon, which
oh,
both
that's
men
right.
also worked on. So they're kind of that cover is fantastic as well. So it's really exciting to see them working on a book about the show for the 40th anniversary that fans will be able to get, and I'm hoping they'll be able to like issue some prints of some of those. I mean, Larry's cover has Duke and Destro on it, and if you go to cons, you know that Michael Bell's quite often at cons, and
Yep.
Arthur Burkhart is quite often at cons. So that's kind of all of those covers. You could go and you could get the voice actors to sign.
I hesitate to mention there's a show coming up in June that both of them are going to be at. Um, and I will be there. And I really can't speak about this, but a company that manufactures the toys that are pictured in the back of me are going to probably be there. I wish IDW could attend this particular show as well, and we can get you guys out there for that. That would be
Yeah,
fantastic.
fantastic. Yeah, if you could get Dan and Eric, and if Luis would come up and come to the country and be there, it'd be great to have all of them. And maybe even like Larry, Rick, and Will start popping out to shows, and you could get that signed as well.
Larry's been
It's
doing a couple of shows recently, not a ton like he was doing before the this situation, but he has popped up at a handful of shows this year, more than he had the year and a half prior. So that's a positive sign that everybody's getting out there and doing things.
a lot of people don't know that the comic and the cartoon crossed over earlier than some people will not know. And a lot of people know this, but some people, maybe many don't. So when Larry Houston came on board, that was during the Mass Device. Okay. And again, as a storyboard artist, you're kind of a director. So he designed Destro's castle for the Mass Device. He had a big
Oh,
picture, but he designed it. It was up there. Larry was in the Sunbow offices in New York going over because, of course, they were connected to Marvel, and Larry's at Marvel at that time. And he saw it. He thought that was an awesome castle, and he met Larry. And he saw that, and he's like, that's great. I'm going to use that. And so that's the silent castle. And so you wouldn't have had two Larrys, Larry squared, and you get a fantastic castle in both the comic and the tune, which is pretty fun. And they hadn't seen each other since those days until both of them were at a WonderCon. So there's a photo out there on Larry's page of Larry and Larry just sort of together. It's again, these are
that was
things
just recently, wasn't it?
that WonderCon was a few years ago. Larry's posted it. I took the picture because I happened to be there. But it was a great WonderCon to have them both there.
I think he just posted that as an anniversary photo from that convention. So I think it was just recently that he posted it
Yeah,
again, and I was like, "Oh wow, that's pretty cool." The
these
people that
things out. I'm just like, that's so fascinating. I love it. Any little detail that comes out from the toy or comic where you see that things cross over in a crazy way, it's great.
So, is there anything else that we haven't covered involving Saturday Morning Adventures and your cool job at IDW, research specialist for GI Joe, that you would like to talk about now before we head out?
I'm still in a bit of shock and awe that I'm even there. And so there's not much more I can say or put out. I mean, this month, there's like 4 different GI Joe things coming out. There's the Cobra book that's like reprints of Cobra issues. Saturday Morning Adventures #3. We just had 291, which Shannon Gallant, S.L. Gallant, is back on the book as the artist, and that issue is pretty fantastic. And he's going to be doing a bunch more. I've looked at those issues coming up. There is some fantastic storytelling, art, everything coming up for this new run called High Stakes. So that's kind of, and they use kind of a suggestion I brought in, but I'm not going to say what it is because that's just a tiny thing. But it's fantastic.
And the 40th anniversary Snake Eyes 21 is coming out again with all those different people working on that as well.
And I know that there's also going to be a hardcover version of that coming out much later this year as well that collectors can get, because I saw something about it. I think it was either on an Amazon or an online comic page that they're already taking like pre-orders for that. I have seen that issue, and every page, you know, is a delight. And they'll have both the old, I believe, and the new in there. But every page is a delight. I think. I'm hoping.
See, I did not know they were doing a comparative thing with the artists now and the original artist, which I think the original was Larry Hama, if I'm not mistaken. He did the entire issue because they were on a time crunch, and he had to do it, and that's why it didn't have any words in it as well. It was all time. So he drew it. Somebody else, I think, inked it, and he did the all the like plotting of it. Just because of time.
Yeah, he plots everything, and there's still time crunches. It'd be great to compare. I'm hoping it comes out that way, because I think that was the original concept, was to have both so that people could see both. So knock on wood, I know it's many, many, many pages. So that's going to be great. And actually, if the hardcover comes out, that's just a must buy for me for that one.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. In fact, I think that's fantastic, and I'm looking forward to seeing Larry's new cover really close up on that. It looks good from what I've seen so far.
Yeah. One thing I do want to mention is it does look like there's a dearth of, I mean, you have all your cool G.I. Joe stuff behind you. It's like, she's not a fan. Where's all of her G.I. Joe stuff? But you see, hold on. If I go like this, that's my, and we go around here. So it's there. That's my Duke. That's my case of Dukes. My husband puts up with that. There's another case of Dukes. Some more G.I. Joe stuff. It's all over the house. It's just, if I put it behind me, then I have a Duke stained glass window. You can't see it because it's sunny. There's Splash. Hi, Splash. So it's there. I have it. I can't put any of it behind me right there because there's windows. Otherwise, I would. My husband does have a limit to how much can be in the living room. I'd take you into the office, but it's also the dog's room, so that's not happening.
And we're all blessed with our partners, spouses that put up with a lot of this stuff. I had to build an entire room in my garage in order to do what I'm doing. So
it's nice to have that. We were talking about earlier before you recorded about that life balance, right? You have to have it. I'm lucky that he's actually involved himself in it, and he cheers me on. He's my biggest cheerleader. So in everything I do, including this, and he will just push me and support me. I mean, not push like push, but like hold me up kind of thing. He provides that for me, but he also, enjoys seeing it go well. And he's had more fun watching that happen and even taking part in doing the coloring. He wrote down he's got another cover he's working on from an artist who's like, it was my dream to always friggin' draw, and now I'm doing it. And his cover's fantastic. But he was coloring that on the train this morning, on his little iPad. So it's fantastic. You're right. We got to have that balance in all things, that work, life, and if you can overlap them a bit in a way that, hi girls, it's the mailman, sorry. If you can overlap that in a way, then that's fantastic. And you've done it.
I've worked very hard at it. It's not an easy balance, let me tell you that. But I've loved the comic community and the comic world, and I've been doing interviews for many, many years. And it was just natural that I would bring that to my love of G.I. Joe, even though I have interviewed G.I. Joe folks before, like Larry Hama, Chuck Dixon, Robert Atkins, S.L. Gallant, the folks from Devil's Due. I cannot think of their names at the top of my head, but I have interviewed them in the comic book community, in the comic book world, but not in the GI Joe world. Now I'm getting to do that, and it makes me so happy to do that and be a part of this world. As little part that I am in it, it just makes me happy, and I hope to do more and more of this work. And it is a pleasure that I had an opportunity to speak with you, another fan, another person that loves GI Joe like me, and I can just talk to folks like yourself all day long about GI Joe. I wish I
Right.
had more opportunities to do so. I'm looking forward to those opportunities in the future. So I want to thank you very much for your time today. This has been another GI Joe comics, well, I should say product review and comics review together this time. I hope to see you in the future, Diana.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks for